All right, thank you very much. I'm very mindful of the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that we do have a panel and this probably would be the last speaking slot, and we have a long day. So I'm just going to be very quick and brief as much as I can. So today's topic is going to be regarding the human risk, right? All my life and all our life, as we have moved on, when you were studying, when you were in your professional organizations, when you're working, what all we learned is that an organization stands on three pillars, right? The people, the process, and the technology. And that's something that was part of our DNA as we grow up, and join any organization. But over the period of, over the cycle of things that we see, technology actually takes over almost all the other factors that you have in the organization. So with that, the next 15 minutes, we will be looking at the human aspect of the things in cybersecurity. And I might just want to start with a bit of a, history, a bit of a background. I know that we have discussed a lot about the future, the futuristic technologies, but I just want to begin with one thing. The core, the basis of this connectivity, the way we stand today, right? The internet. I don't know who and when started to use the internet, but probably we could safely say some of us maybe in the early 90s, some of us in the mid 90s, some of us in the late 90s or the 2000s, right? So that was the backbone. That still is the very, very backbone of the information sharing and all that. And everything was working fine in those days when we first started to hear about words like DDoS, viruses, spywares, and malwares, right? And then somebody thought, oh, okay, so now this is the blockade. There has to be something to mitigate it. And then we started to hear the first gen of technology controls. And I'm pretty sure that 90% of the people who are sitting in this in this hall right now must have implemented either a firewall, either an antivirus, or an IPS as the first technology solution, right? So if you look at the first gen of the issues, then we had the first set of technology. And we thought that probably that one first gen of technology might solve the problem. But it did not happen. And then we started to hear words like phishing, worms, trojans, cross-site scripting, man in the middle, right? All of them. And then we thought, oh, okay, if we have the second gen of threats, might be a second gen of technology that could help us stop all of this, right? And then we started to hear words like HIPS, host-based intrusion prevention system, right? And then email gateways, the web gateways, the network admission controls, the vulnerability scanners, the themes. And then we thought, okay, now we have this layer of technology and that might just sort all our problems out, and it still didn't happen. And lo and behold, we had another set of words, like we started hearing about zero-day exploits, APTs, business email compromises, ransomwares, more complicated threats, more complicated words, and another more complicated set of technology, which meant that we started hearing about what we used to know a firewall with a lot of new different features turned out to be a next generation firewall. What we used to know as an IPS with a lot of additional features turned out to be a next generation IPS. What we used to know as SIEM turned out to be the next generation SIEM. And I promise you, probably next year or the very next year, when we'll be coming here and sitting here again, we'll be hearing another layer of technology and might be another layer of threats. So the point, ladies and gentlemen, the case that I'm trying to plead here in front of all of us here is that between the technology and the threats, it always is going to be a cat and mouse game. And I'm going to try and just zoom in the canvas on the human risk from that whole larger picture. I do understand from since 9 o'clock in the morning till now, we've already discussed enough about the threat landscape, right? We've already talked about all of them. We do understand what business email compromises are, the ransomwares, and all those wonderful stories that my colleagues who have graced the stage before me have already talked about it. I just want to pick some of them and just build the case. As I said, I'm not going to talk about fish rod or what we do. I'm just here to plead the case for the people part in that whole cybersecurity equation. So moving on, I'm just going to focus on a few of those threats that are purely targeted towards the humans. And there is no doubt about it. There is nobody who could question that social engineering, phishing, password attacks, business email compromises, and phishing, they all are targeted towards the humans, the end users, right? And just to quantify some of this, I just want to emphasize a few of these facts, but probably might want to skip this because I want to come to the core part of my discussion. We do all understand that humans are the weakest link. We do understand that yes, a lot of times in all of the incidents, the end users are involved and that's where it comes from. But if you look at a dichotomy of any cybersecurity incident, and I mean any, even if it's a dollar stolen or $1 million or even $1 billion, right? These four are behind the pillar. I mean, if you look at the dichotomy of this, you will find these four factors actually contributing to play any sort of role when anybody infiltrates your organization. And where do they come from? I just want to give you that context. For example, first, social engineering. All the cybersecurity experts sitting in this room, yes, we agree that social engineering actually is where to attack. Who do we find to attack? That's what social engineering is all about, right? And then, how do we infiltrate the medium? Phishing. How do we get the information? The malware, right? Or take it out. And then, if we have somebody within the organization who could help us, I think that serves as an icing on the cake, like a cherry on the top, right? And if you look at these, this whole dichotomy, and the way I divide it across is that social engineering and insider threat is purely a human element. Whereas the malware and the phishing means how do we get in there, like the medium, and what are we going to drop? How do we execute? That is purely a technical component. Now, as I said, if it's a dollar breach or $1 million breach or $1 billion breach, that's the whole process. These four are the pillars, right? And if these four are perfect, cooked well and dished well, that serves as a perfect recipe of creating a cybersecurity breach. And if you do not believe me, I just might want to just give you one example of how things have shaped up. I'm sure a lot of us would have heard about an incident that took place in 2016. I know it's quite an outdated one, but few of the facts that came to the light just last year, that's why I thought it's relevant to bring this case and give it a life again. So we heard about this case of Bank of Bangladesh that took place in 2016. So those of you who don't know about it, I'm sure we all must have, but that was $1 billion heist, the world knows it about, right? Where 35 transactions, the Central Bank of Bangladesh was hacked and 35 transactions were executed and $1 billion worth of amount was tried to be transacted. Out of those 35 transactions, 30 were blocked and 5 of them actually went through. And those 5 transactions actually ended up landing in Philippines with an RCBC bank, Rizal Commercial Corporation Bank. That $81 million landed there over the weekend, and interestingly, it landed in 4 accounts. $6 million in a guy named Cruz, $30 million in Lagosas, $30 million to Vergara, and another $19 million to Vasiquas. Now, the interesting part is, for anybody who's from a compliance background, those amounts actually went into those accounts where those 4 accounts, all of them were opened with an exact amount of denominations, $500 US. And after that deposit of that $500, never ever this amount over a period of 1 year received even a dime. The human part. When this amount was being transferred, nobody bothered to have a look at it, that this account never received $1. How come $19 million have been received in this account? Right? I'll make it a little more interesting. Because remember, as I said, the 4 pillars, the social engineering, the phishing, the malware, and the insider, the perfect recipe of, building a cyber threat or an attack. Now, if you look at it, I just want to, again, bifurcate it based on how did the social engineering work. Now, the question being, fine, somebody must have been involved, but how did the bad guys actually were able to take control of the Central Bank of Bangladesh system and be able to execute those threats, right? Or execute those transactions. Now, interestingly, the very first part, phishing. Where did I get this information from? And I would like all of us to please do visit this. Central Bank of Bangladesh very recently, last year, filed a case in New York. And a legal copy of that case, I was lucky enough to find it, was online available. An 80-page document and worth reading everything, because so far, whatever we have listened about the Bank of Bangladesh has been through the canvas of a vendor. This is for the first time we get all the information from a legal document, a case that was filed and a case that was won. And what that case actually says, it says that how did the bad guys enter? They said it was a phishing attack because at that time the Bank of Bangladesh was looking for some business analyst for a critical project. The bad guys did some social engineering and they thought that if we send the resumes to the HR, they might be tempted to click because that's what they are finding these days. So they sent 16 emails. And that legal document that I'm talking to you about, it's available with me at our booth. Anybody is interested. So they sent 16 emails, out of which 4 guys clicked on the link. That's how the backdoor was created and the whole channel was executed, and that was not enough. Because that only led them to infiltrate into the organization, maybe take control of the payment systems, and then be able to transact. How do we get the money out from there, right? To get that money out, they had to have some kind of an insider. And if anybody is interested to pursue this case more, there is a name called Maya Digota. She was a branch manager at the RCBC who actually was involved in actually taking that amount and transferring it first to those 4 guys and then from there to actually those casinos. Because at that time, there was rule that any money that goes into a casino, that's unchecked for. Nobody will be able to ask any question, right? So the point that I'm trying to make here, gentlemen and ladies, is that when you have a medium, a core component like phishing, when you have done the social engineering well, when you have the human component involved into the equation, that's a perfect recipe. And if that is not enough, that's probably the last one. I usually try to stay away from the newspaper clippings, but this is the most recent one. 2016, somebody may say, oh, you're too outdated. But this is May 2024 that I'm talking about, and the word that impressed me the most, and this was this word, digitally cloned CFO. $25 million taken away from Arup, a UK-based engineering company. What happens? 3 times the bad guys send a phishing email to an accountant saying that we are asking you to transfer this amount, $25 million, I'm your CFO. And the guy says, oh, I know that my CFO never sends me email like this. And then lo and behold, what happens? Artificial intelligence, the one that we've been talking about. So if the good guys are using it for the good reason, the bad guys are equally using it for the wrong reasons too. A Zoom call initiated through AI. The accountant receives an invite on Zoom that I'm your CFO, come and connect with me. I have sent you 3 emails, you are not listening to me. So on a Zoom call, face to face, he is talking to his CFO, which is a digitally cloned CFO, not his actual one. So the point being that if the AI is playing a role, technology is not here. It's just the trust, guys. Somebody believes as an end user that the person I'm talking to whom is actually my CFO. The trust, the human angle, right? Now, with that background, the human risk becomes critical, right? If you look at it from a social engineering point of view or whatever. And how do we define human risk as? I know it's quite an emerging topic. People used to cover it under security awareness or maybe phishing readiness and all that. But it purely has 4 components the way you look at it. 1, detect and measure human behaviors, right? I'll elaborate a little bit more on that. The second part is to initiate policy and training, because we all have these components in our organizations and they must be implemented in letter and spirit because they are purely focused towards the end users. And then educating and enabling the workforce. And last, to build a pure and positive cyber security culture. That probably was the second last slide that I wanted to talk to you about. But how does this goes and implement, right? Any organization who is willing to actually invest in the human risk management, how do we go about it? What are the few of those use cases that exist? I'm going to talk about the primitive and primary as well as some of the advanced use cases. For example, wouldn't it be nice for any organization to know that out of my 10,000, 5,000 or whatever thousand users that I have, how many corporate email IDs are already part of the dark web? Just to press one button, scan it, and you get to know that out of those 10,000, 500 email addresses are already lying somewhere on the dark web, which the bad guys could use to send phishing emails to. That's the first step. The second one, how aware or determine if there were any phishing emails that were to be received by my organization, how many people would actually click on them. In a quantitative manner, let's call it phishing index. How vulnerable my organization is to phishing attacks. Who are the most vulnerable users? Who are the most vulnerable departments? How vulnerable is my organization to some of those KPIs, right? And then how aware my organization is. Who are the most vulnerable users? Who are the most vulnerable, who are the most aware end users, right? And then calculate awareness index based on that. And then how compliant my organization is. I'm sure we all hear about the processes, right? People, the process, and the technology. You must be doing an ISO 27001, a business continuity 22301 or whatever. But do we know how compliant? And an auditor, whenever he lands in first, he asks for the first thing, have you implemented your ISMS? And he starts looking for documentation. Wouldn't it be nice to have a dashboard where you could show, oh yes, see, on this particular project, my organization is 89% compliant. This guy is 100% compliant because out of those 123 policies that I have, the guy has gone through all of them, acknowledged, and is aware. This is the primitive part, right? And then if there are any phishing emails, the guy should be able to report, or any end user should be able to report. Now that's a primary part, right? But I want to take it to another direction, where the actual letter and spirit of human risk falls into. We did discuss about some of those use cases, right? That anybody who, for example, your technology control says that, and you have implemented the DLP, and it says that you should not be able to upload any critical document which has any financial information. The moment somebody uploads it, what we start looking at it is from a technology canvas. Okay, what will happen? The moment you upload the document here, the moment it will raise a flag, and then the whole SOC team will start looking and hunting down, oh, this was a breach of the rule, and there is a red flag. We must start looking at it from a technology perspective, take it down, and that's it. But did anybody ever thought, wouldn't it be nice to actually flag it and put it, in the report card of the end user? That there should be a profile of every end user, whereby in that profile you could have his awareness index, you could have his policy compliance index, you could have his phishing index, you could have details that out of how many breaches did he was at least played some part, at least from a rules breakage point of view. Why did somebody try to enter the data center midnight when he's not supposed to? Goes into the log of that end user. So you could have a report of that end user and see that how many breaches or how many rule violations he was part of, so that you have a better visibility on the human risk. And that's the business, ladies and gentlemen. We as FishRod are in, and I'm serving more than 300 organizations here in the region. And I think I've pretty much summed that canvas up, because we as FishRod do not go into the product details discussion. So I'll probably skip that part out and come to the conclusion of this discussion. I've generally left the conclusion slides empty, because with technology, it's easier. It's black, it's white. There is nothing gray. But when we are trying to plead the case of humans, trust me, there is a lot of gray. I do understand that we as an industry are talking about the zero trust and all that, right? So we're talking about the zero trust on the technology. How about trusting the humans? And who would know better than the humans that we do have trust issues, right? With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate, and I hope that I was able to plead the case for the human risk. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.